Welcome to the Master Builders Show, sponsored by the First National Bank of Weatherford. I am your host, Jim Gibson, president of Gibson Home Builders Incorporated, a registered builder in the state of Texas, a graduate master builder certified by the National Association of Home Builders, a current member of the National Green Building Council, the Texas Association of Builders, National Association of Builders, Greater Fort Worth Builders Association, and the past president of Parker County Builders Association. Today's topic is going to be regional building classifications and thermal comfort. And my guest today is Gene Gibson, Vice President of Gibson Home Builders. I have the little slips up there. Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I hope everybody had a great New Year. And anyway, like I said, our topic today is going to be regional building classifications. And one of the questions I get asked frequently is why can't we do it like they do up north? And primarily reason is climate difference. And
I thought it was just because you're a Texan and you're bullheaded.
Yeah, well, that's one of them. Why do we have different building techniques for different parts of the country? Well, the primary reason is because of the climate. They've got climate classifications back several years ago. They came up with we all built like they did up north, and they had problems with it, primarily moisture problems and all that. So they came up with like 19 different classifications for different regions, and they've cut those back to 8, I believe, 8 regions today. And the North Texas areas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Parker County, and all these areas up around here are classified in the hot and humid climate.
Because I always think of the coast of Texas as being humid, not up here.
Well, the Texas is in the hot, humid area, but they also have a marine classification. We'll kind of go through each classification.
Yeah, because I read your notes about all the classifications, and it's a foreign language. I couldn't figure it all out.
Well,
and when you talk about climate, it's not that we get cold and we get hot. It's the amount of time we stay cold and the humidity, and how the amount of time we stay hot and the humidity. Well, right? Is that what you were trying to differentiate?
Well, it's a culmination of how long we stay, how many heating degree days we have, moisture, our relative humidity, our precipitation, our rainfall, how cold it gets, how hot it gets. Everything is taken into consideration. And they've got some ways that they figure these things. And like I said, we're classified as the hot, humid climate. And that particular region is one that has 20 or more inches of rain. And this year we're just under 50. I think. No,
we made it to 50. It's at the airport, today. And we hit 50.
Well, great. That was another record, I guess, huh? Today,
well, does that change our classification?
Well, no.
How fluid are these classifications?
These classifications are well, we've just started on it. Okay, it's more than 20 inches, so
right.
That 50 is more, right? 50 is more than 20 inches. Is your math correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and the other thing that they look into is an average of 67 degrees or higher on wet bulb temperature for 3,000 hours or more. In the warmest 6 consecutive months of the year, or 73 degrees Fahrenheit or higher on wet bulb temperatures for 1,500 hours or more during the warmest 6 consecutive months of the year.
That's very confusing.
Well, okay.
First of all, I have a question.
All right.
These classifications can't be for 1 year at a time, right? Then, if you're going to base building on these classifications, they can't be just 1 year.
They're from past performance. They're for several years.
Just several, not decades.
Well, no, these are broken down in decades. These are
okay, that makes more sense.
Taken over decades.
Because this is an exceptional year, and we probably have years that were less than 20.
Right, but our temperatures really haven't varied that much.
Even with global warming?
Even with global warming, we haven't varied that much.
Well, isn't global warming a matter of a degree or two worldwide?
Right, and that's what's causing the ice caps to melt and all.
So
that.
it's not going to dramatically affect this. This is pretty solid.
This is pretty solid, and it's taken several years to come to this.
Okay.
And the wet bulb temperature, which I mentioned, a wet bulb temperature, what they do is they take a regular thermometer and they use a mercury-filled one instead of the other fluids that they put in them. But what they do, they wrap a piece of muslin cloth around the bottom of it, and they wet it. and they put it in temperature, and it will be the temperature will be lower than it would if it was a dry bulb. And the reason they wet it is because it also, if what it does, it takes and evaporates from that cloth at a certain rate.
Yeah.
Well, it evaporates depending on how much moisture there's in the air. If the air is saturated, it doesn't evaporate as fast.
Oh.
And if it's drier, it evaporates much faster. And what they do, they take the temperature of that, and that's what most all these figures are figured on. The main one, that's part of it, and also in the hot, humid area, we have intense solar radiation. Our sun here, it beats down in Texas, and we have, let's see here, it increases, it makes a large thermal load. So what we're doing here is we have a problem cooling our houses, not necessarily heating our houses. Our winter months are very mild. They're very short
compared to the rest of the country. Even though we're cold today.
We're cold today, but we're not that cold today. I mean, I'm not running around in a ski suit or anything, so it's it's not snowing, and it's fairly comfortable to me out there. I don't know what the temperature is. It's probably in the 50s.
Well, I don't know. I'm bundled up.
You're bundled up. Well, you're a little colder than I am. But anyway, that's hot, humid, and then the next category they go to is the mixed humid, which is let's see, climate generally defined as a region that receives more than 20 inches, just like we do.
Or where would this be? A mixed humid.
Mixed humid.
What part of the country are we talking about?
I really didn't pull a map up.
Oh, okay.
I'm concerned about.
But we're hot, humid.
We're hot, humid. We're classified hot, humid, and north of us, a little bit goes into mixed humid, and that's where they have more than 20 inches of rain, and they have approximately 5,400 heating degree days. And what they do, the heating degree days, again, well, I didn't explain heating degree days. I did.
No.
Did I yet? Okay, a heating degree day, let me see, let me look through my note here. What they do on a heating degree day, they take the average of the high and low for that day, and they have a base temperature of 65 degrees. And what you do, if the temperature is 65 degrees or above for that particular day, then there's no heating degree. Calculated for it. But if let's take an example, you got the high today is 60 degrees, the low is 40 degrees. You take and add those two together, divide by 2. So you add 2 together, that's 100 degrees, or 100 degrees.
It always has been. Yeah, go ahead.
Divide by 2, that comes out
50.
to 50. Yeah. All right. You take their baseline of 65 degrees, and you subtract that 50 from it, which gives you 15 degrees. And that's a 15-degree day. So 5,400 heating degree days is not really 5,400 days. It's 5,400 degrees difference that we would require heating.
Oh, over the entire period.
Over the entire period.
Okay, that makes more sense.
That's,
okay,
like I said, pretty well the way it's figured. And that...
so mixed humid, I was trying to look at these sections and try to figure out regions of the country for identification. And mixed humid but colder would be north of us. Right.
You're like I said, it
Atlanta, Oklahoma.
Well, like I said, they receive more than 20 inches. A mixed humid do receive more than 20 inches of rain, so they could receive 60 inches of rain, 80 inches of rain, as long as it's more than 20. Is the baseline, and has approximately 5,400 heating degree days or fewer, not more than. Approximately 5,400 or fewer. And looks like we've got to take a break here. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the Master Builder Show. I'm your host, Jim Gibson. Today's show is sponsored by the First National Bank of Weatherford. My guest today is Gene Gibson, Vice President of Gibson Home Builders Incorporated. I didn't screw it up that time.
No, you didn't at all. And I'm your wife.
I
think that was my first title.
Yeah. It was. Okay. It was. I kind of placed you on the spot there for Vice President because I needed one. And I only wanted to take orders. And that was a mistake, wasn't it? But anyhow.
You get real brave on the radio, I'll tell you.
We were talking about mixed
humid.
You
don't get away with half this much at home.
I know. But anyway, I am the host, remember.
Yeah.
Okay, talked about hot, humid climate, which we are located in our region, and we briefly touched on mixed humid.
Which we guesstimated was like Atlanta and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to think of locations too.
Okay, yeah. Okay, mixed humid again is that receives more than 20 inches of rain, annual precipitation, and has approximately 5,400 heating degree days based on 65 degrees or fewer. 5,400 heating degree days or fewer. And looks like it's where the average monthly outdoor temperature drops below 45 degrees during the winter months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have to take all those things into account. Then we go to the hot, dry. Hot, dry climate is generally defined as one that receives less than 20 inches of rain.
Okay, so we're talking Arizona.
Yes, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, most likely Arizona.
Because Florida wouldn't be hot, dry.
No.
It'd be hot, humid.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Florida, I think, is classified in marine.
Oh, okay.
No. Florida's hot. Marine is going to be like up the west coast, up in Washington, down through.
Really?
Yeah, down through there. Oregon, Washington.
I had no idea.
California is a marine. And
one of the toughest things I had to adjust to when I first moved to Florida long, long ago was I had a pair of shoes that were wet.
Right.
And put them in the closet overnight.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
And the next morning, they had blue fuzz all over them.
Right.
It was amazing to me just how fast. That's why my children grew up with the scent of bleach on everything.
Well, bleach does kill it.
Yeah.
Okay, the hot, dry climate now.
Yeah, we're talking about Arizona, so it's less rain.
Well, it's
and
defined
fewer days.
It receives less than 20 inches of rainfall annually, and the monthly average outdoor temperature remains above 45 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably some places in Arizona, like up in the mountains area and stuff, that wouldn't be classified that.
Ah, that's true.
Yeah, because
Makes
your temperature has to remain above 45 degrees in a hot, dry with less than 20 inches of rain. All right.
But and the other thing, thinking of classifications, and you're just saying that there. Remember when in the Hawaiian Islands,
right.
One side of the island would get 100+ inches of rain,
right,
and the side that usually has the hotels on it doesn't. It gets much, much drier. They pump the water down from that rain side.
Right.
And where else did we run into something that?
Oh,
in Colorado.
On the east side and the west side of the mountains?
Yeah, because the aspen were growing, and I thought, how wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
And that man said,
don't buy property where the aspen grows.
Because that's where all the snow builds up. That's where all the moisture is.
The aspen trees are one plant, and what they do, they require a great deal of water.
Yeah.
So the water is primarily in the snowfall up there, and it sets in the aspen groves, and the melting snow makes the aspen groves thrive. So what they're saying is get on the south side of the mountain or someplace like that, that the snow would melt off in the summertime or in the spring faster than it would on the side where the aspen grows.
And how difficult would that be? You know, your regions are so complex. But in here I'm not aware that here in North Texas we have that kind of where a region is so dramatically split, where one side of the mountain in Colorado is hot, cold, and humid, and the other side is arid.
Well, we're still split, and I think it's 2 or 3 areas. Like you get up in the northern Panhandle and stuff that borders New Mexico on up there, the tip of the Panhandle, up and all that. That's going to be in a different region. We're actually on the border, I believe, of the hot, humid region. As we get further north in Texas, you're going to go into like mixed humid or mixed dry.
Oh, okay.
A mixed, it depends on the rainfall, the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of going to run through these here. The hot,
dry.
I
know.
Hot, dry.
It just helps me understand this better if I can visualize. And that's what I was trying to do. To make sense of all of this.
The mixed dry is going to be the next category. Mixed dry climate is generally defined as a region that receives less than 20 inches of annual rainfall, has approximately 5,400 heating degree days or less, and where the average monthly outdoor temperature drops below 45 degrees. So that's a mixed dry. So that would be up in the up in the mountain areas of Arizona and stuff like that, where the temperature would drop.
Okay, that's Utah. Where you have desert and it's cold at night.
Probably. Like I said, I hate to name all the states without my map up here, but you can go into and pull it up off the Department of Energy. Pull up.
Is that where all this definition came from? Was
most
the DOE?
All this came from the Department of Energy and their regional.
And
plan.
The point of all of this humidity and heat and cold is to define your construction specifically for your area.
Right.
So you're going to take this information and then translate it for us into how you would build here in North Texas.
How you build here in North Texas versus what you would do up in
Canada,
Minnesota, Washington.
Well, places I've lived in. I grew up in Canada.
Right.
I went to nursing school in Connecticut. We had basements in both places.
Right.
Moved to Florida onto a slab. Was the first time I'd ever seen terrazzo. Right. And concrete walls with no insulation.
Right. Well, central air conditioning and heating is relatively new in construction. I mean, I would say relatively new over the past 100 years, because back in the 50s and 60s, they weren't putting central heat and air in all the homes.
No, it was novel.
It was a novel thing. But back then, air conditioning on your cars was an option. When have you found a car here in Texas on any lot or anything that doesn't come without air conditioning? It just doesn't happen. I remember growing up, we had swamp coolers or water coolers or whatever they call them.
I'd never heard of those till I got to Texas.
Yeah, well, they were big back in the 50s and those areas down there. So we developed more problems as our houses got tighter and tighter. And back when the houses, wind would blow through them, they would dry out.
Yeah.
And as we developed our building techniques and got the houses tighter and tighter, then it became a problem. Moisture became a problem. We'll kind of cover that. Let's just go over the regions first.
One of the things I heard long ago, too, about Florida, the reason it developed from the 1950s on was because of air conditioning. That without air conditioning, Florida would not be what it is today.
Correct.
Because it's a mold haven.
Well, it's a mold haven. It's hot and humid.
And very humid.
It's uncomfortable. And so, the population moved that way because
of air conditioning is what the Floridians contend.
The youth is, don't you know?
I missed it that day, I'll go look again another day.
All right, mixed dry. Mixed dry, again, is generally defined as a region that receives less than 20 inches of water rainfall annually and has approximately 5,400 heating degree days based on 50 degrees Fahrenheit for some reason or less. Okay, based on 50 degrees or less, and where the average monthly outdoor temperature drops below 45 degrees during the winter months. Okay, now the next climate we're going to go into is a cold climate. Cold climate is generally defined as a region with approximately 5,400 heating degree days based on 65 degrees Fahrenheit or more, and fewer than 9,000 heating degree days based on 65. So it's more than 5,400, but less than 9,000. That's your cold climate, and that would probably be up around the Canadian border, North Dakota, up in those areas up in there where it gets down in the 30s. We've got to take another break now. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Master Builder Show. I am your host, Jim Gibson. Today's show is sponsored by the First National Bank of Weatherford. My guest today is my wife and also Vice President of Gibson Home Builders.
And you did it right that time. Thank you.
Anyway, we were talking about the cold region, climate building. And all these are building regions, and how they're figured, again, is on heating degree days. And heating degree days is they take the high and low temperature of that day, add them together, divide by 2, and then subtract them from 65 degrees. And like I said, if you add 60, the high today was 60, the low was 40. You add those together, it comes up with 100. You subtract 65 from that. And
you did it wrong.
No, I did it wrong. You divide by 2, it comes up with 50.
Right.
And
subtract 50 from 65. You have 15
degree
heating days.
Heating day.
Heating degree days.
Heating degree day.
Yeah.
So you add all those up, and that's how they get all these large figures. Like the cold climate is generally defined as a region with approximately 5,400 heating degree days based on 65 degrees or more, and fewer than approximately 9,000 heating degree days based on 65 degrees. So then we go to very cold. Very cold climate is just a step up, it's a region that's generally defined with approximately 9,000 heating degree days based on 65 degrees, and more 9,000 or more, and fewer than 12,600 heating degree days based on a 65 degree.
I just did a little math too on the cold, estimating roughly not a terribly cold winter.
Right.
At 20 heating degree days per day, divided into that 5,400, and it just ends up at 27 days. It doesn't make sense to me. My math must be way off. 270 days.
Yeah,
270 days.
270 days comes out more.
Of very mild weather.
Well,
when you start putting it in perspective, that's a very moderate climate.
Well, like I said, there again, I didn't bring my maps up here.
I know, but
and that may be Midwest. Midwestern region, and then you get into your very cold days,
what you're talking about though was a high of 60, a low of 40.
Well, I know, but you might have days
but
up in certain areas up here that equate to a high of 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then a low of 20 below.
Yeah.
So you still subtract those from 65. That's how they get up in these 12,000 heating degree day figures. Based on, and then you go from very cold, you jump up to subarctic. And a subarctic is a region that has 12,600 heating degree days or more. And
subarctic is Northwest Territory in this country. Siberia. We've met, in fact, we met somebody from Siberia.
We did?
Yes, when we were living in Jackson, Wyoming.
Oh, yeah.
An exchange student that we had worked with was from Siberia, and we talked about the climate up there, and it's a different world.
It's cold.
Yeah.
Anyway, then we go to marine climate, and marine climate is generally defined as a region that meets the following criteria. It has a mean temperature of the coldest month between 27 degrees Fahrenheit and 65 degrees. And what we're talking about here is probably Oregon, Washington.
Pacific currents, so we'd have
coast.
to do that.
Yeah, and the warmest month, mean temperatures of less than 72 degrees. And at least 4 months with the mean temperature more than 50 degrees. And a dry season in the summer.
Wow.
And the month with the heaviest precipitation, cold season, in the cold season has at least 3 times as much as precipitation as the month with the least amount.
This is why it takes the Department of Energy to figure this all out.
Like I said, when I first started out here, we were building like they did up north, and then they come up with 19 different regions, and that was just too many and too confusing, because these regions right now are broken down to these ones that we've talked about here, and again they're broken down by the Department of Energy, and the list of them are mixed humid, hot and dry, mixed dry, cold, very cold, subarctic, and marine.
So this is something you have to educate your client about. You build in 5 counties right now.
Yeah, but they're all in the same region.
Okay. So when I moved down here from Juneau, Alaska, I'm going to expect you to build me the same house. Right.
And what we're doing here differently is it starts with the foundation. And up there, you've got to build your foundation and insulate below the frost line. And
which can be 18 inches in New England and a whole,
And one of the reasons that
and permafrost elsewhere.
Basements aren't as popular down here is because they're not necessary. Back when basements were started in the northern areas, they built basements to store fuel oil, coal.
The coal chute went into the basement.
Their boilers were down there. They needed a place that they could store everything that was required to heat them throughout their winter months, because their winter months might last 9-10 months.
The house I grew up in Connecticut was an exceptional old house, and it was fieldstone, 18-inch thick walls with plaster on the inside. In the winter months, the curtains would flap when the winds were up. But it had 3 basements. It was 3 stories up and 3 stories down. And the first level was below the frost line.
Right.
and that was a root cellar, wine cellar for keeping things cool for you.
Right.
The house was built at 1900 in that era. So they didn't have the refrigeration capabilities. So there was the root cellar. Then the next level down, because they didn't just have a basement, they had multiple purpose levels.
Right.
And the second level down was for the coal, the washer and dryer was down there, and it was a place in New England, at least in the wintertime, when you hang your laundry out in the line, it would just freeze.
Right.
So they could hang laundry in there. The third level down was way below ground, and our house had a pool table in there. But it was a relatively dry spot, but very, very dry. It was many steps down. So you went in, down steps to the root cellar, down steps to a basement, down more steps. And that's how they utilize their house.
Well, there again, the reason we don't build Texas, or we do build basements here, but the reason people do build them is because they want them and for extra space. And it really, in certain areas, it's not that much more expensive to go down than it is to spread out, especially with the price of dirt around here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Weatherford is not that bad, but you get up around the North Dallas area and some areas up in there, you wouldn't want to build a basement, I don't think, in Las Colinas. That's the worst soils in the nation, but because of soil movement. But there again, the basements were brought in here, like I said, because people wanted them. And they do provide protection against tornadoes and stuff if you've got a good solid roof on them and a good door on them.
But the other thing was that house in Connecticut had no air conditioning. You only provided heat.
Right.
And there's still hot days in New England and in Canada, but that third level was cool. It was essentially the same temperature year round.
Well, temperature of the earth is 66 degrees. So anything down that far would remain 60. It would be like a cave, be 66 degrees.
And it was
round.
Delightful. And so that was the other bonus, and that was why the billiard table was down there when we moved in, and that's probably why they put it there, so it would be able to have year-round use.
You didn't have any water coming in?
Well, yeah, actually.
Did you?
Because they built cabinets along the walls, and you open those cabinet doors, and it was rock and dirt. Oh. I mean, you could see, they cut the hole in the ground.
Right. That wouldn't go here in Texas. All right, and the reason we were talking about all these different climates is we are in a hot, humid climate, and we do build different in every region. And people that don't pay attention to the rules of the region usually have failures in their houses. And just like when people come down here up north, you put your vapor retarder or vapor barrier on the interior of the house because all your heat, you move from wet to dry and hot to cold. And so they put it up there. They're having to heat their houses most of the time, so they put it on the interior walls. Out here, if we did that, all our walls would rot down because we would collect all the moisture inside because you're moving from hot to cold, remember. Your air movement is how your vapor moves, your water vapor moves. So we put a house wrap on most of the houses here.
But is it a non-permeable wrap?
It's a permeable wrap, but it's measured at certain perms. It is breathable.
Well, that makes more sense than putting a solid plastic bag around a house.
If you put a plastic bag around a house, you're going to have moisture trapped in the wall.
Regardless of whether it's inside or outside.
Yeah. I mean, you do not want to put plastic. You want to put something that does breathe to a certain extent. You want it small. It's measured in perms, and they are permeable. And so it does allow water to go in. I mean, water, it's a drain plane behind most of your brick or all this other stuff because brick are porous and your mortar is porous. So water's going to get behind the brick and water's going to penetrate behind just about anything you clad it with. You can't stop Mother Nature because water moves in several different ways. It's a vapor. It can be blown in. It can be absorbed through capillary action. There's all sorts of things. And so you're going to get water in it. So you've got to build something that is built to withstand that. And so you put this house wrap, we put them on the exteriors here. It's a vapor barrier. And what it does, it acts as a drain plane behind your brick or behind your rock or whatever you got there. And water that does come in behind your brick, you've got a 1-inch air gap on brick. We build them with a 5.5-inch brick ledge, and the brick are basically about 4 inches wide or 3 inches.
All
but
right.
you've got to have an air gap behind them. And what we do, we put weep holes at the bottom, and we have soffit vents at the top. So you've got an airflow down behind in that air gap there that actually allows the water, a great deal of water, to drain out through your weep holes, and it allows a drying effect. But it keeps the water out of your house, but allows anything that got in the house to breathe and dry out.
So it's vapor barrier, not a water barrier.
Right.
So the droplet size would make it, is what you're talking about, is the distinction there.
Yeah, it's a droplet size.
So it would make sense to me to keep all the water out of my house. I would put up a solid plastic barrier so that any moisture hit, it would run out.
It is physically impossible to keep water out of your house.
Oh.
There's no way to keep water out of your house. You're going to have, just by opening and closing the doors, you're going to have moisture.
Yeah.
You want to maintain your house at around 50% humidity. 45 to 55 is ideal. So you've got moisture in the house. Now, when you get above that, you have problems. When you get below that, you have problems.
Yeah, you showed me that chart.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into thermal comfort. And thermal comfort is stated as a condition of the mind, which you express satisfaction with your thermal environment or your surroundings. You don't notice your environment normally if you're comfortable. But if it's too hot, you notice that. If it's too cold, you notice that. But so what we're trying to do is build a house that is thermally comfortable for everybody in it. And now they've got some formulas they figure this out with too. And what they do, they put 100 people in a room, and 80 of them have to be comfortable before it's thermally comfortable. Because you can't please everybody, because everybody's composition is made up differently. But in terms of bodily sensations, thermal comfort is a sensation of hot, warm, slightly warmer, neutral, slightly cooler, cold. And so when you're neutral is when you're the most comfortable. And so when we're building our houses today, we're trying to make the environment inside controllable, so you control your comfort level at all times in every portion of the house. And that's a problem for some, but not for, if you know what you're doing and you're building the houses, that's not
there's
a problem
the operative term, though, if you know what you're doing. I know that if the humidity's really up, you put 100 people in a room and it's humid, I mean, you feel like you can't breathe.
Right.
And it feels very hot. If theoretically, other than static electricity, if the humidity was down at 5%, and it's still the same temperature, are they cold? What is the effect of the low humidity? Do you have any idea?
We'll go through
extremely
that.
Low.
We're going to get to that, I think.
Oh,
but
okay.
The factors.
You got to catch up with the way I think.
Yeah,
I leapfrog.
You're getting ahead of me here. Factors influencing thermal comfort. Well, the primary thing is air temperature, and that's measured with dry bulb. Here we go with wet bulb and dry bulb again. A dry bulb is a regular thermometer, and it actually measures temperature higher than a wet bulb, of course, because the wet bulb has the water muslin around it that actually will measure a different. The wet bulb measures
it's
lower.
It's a sweaty T-shirt cooling you off.
Relative humidity, air temperature, relative humidity, air velocity. So if there's any air movement, that's the reason we put ceiling fans in a lot of our houses to get air movement, because that really you can keep the temperature a little bit higher if there's some type of air movement in there. Radiation. Now, radiation is heat or cold radiation, and it depends on the size of your rooms. And
sunlight in the windows?
Well, that sunlight in the window, if it's direct sunlight, or if you're against a wall. If the wall is extremely cold, then the closer you get to that wall, any difference in your body temperature and
your environment,
anything that's close to you. If you're next to a hot stove, that radiation from that stove heats your body. So, there's a point that if you get too close to that stove, you're going to get burned. Or you're going to be uncomfortable getting too close. And that's why you need your room sized to where the radiant, whether it's either extremely cold outside or extremely hot outside.
Yeah.
And if you insulate it right, you don't feel that. There's only a slight degree difference.
Uh-huh.
But that's one of the factors. Another factor you got to take into account in your comfort zone is your metabolic rate.
That's you and me to a T.
Right. I'm burning up all the time, and you're cold all the time.
Yeah, well, I keep Afghans on. I wear thermal socks. I've got extra sweaters on, and you're sitting there sweating.
Right. And that's why they.
That's why people get married.
Well,
yes.
That's the comfort zone. Again, like I said, 80% of the people have to be comfortable, and you probably wouldn't be one of them. But,
every couple I know, all our friends are in the same category.
Well,
This metabolic rate is interesting. The component here would be the age of the client.
Well, it's age of client. That's the reason we have thermostats, so you can set your comfort level and all this stuff. And metabolic rate also means, is it an exercise room? Are
didn't think of that.
you running in place? Are you, your gyms
or sitting
and
in
stuff
a corner
are kept
reading.
a little cooler than they are than you would keep a normal house, because you're actually doing activity, increasing your metabolic rate.
Excellent.
And
I didn't think of that.
Also, at how much clothing do you wear? Do you run around the house naked, or do you wear coats all the time?
Oh, heaven forbid.
But anyway, like I said, the normal comfort zone or normal environment is an area that at least 80% of the people are comfortable. And that's what we try to do when we're building our houses. And what you want to do is keep your humidity somewhere around 50% in the house. That's ideal. And the reason it's ideal is because you get below, if you get like down to 10 to 20% humidity, your bacteria growth comes up. If you get above 60, your bacteria growth grows. Viruses thrive in lower humidity, like anything from about 30% humidity to on down to 10%. Viruses grow, and then when you get your humidity back up in the 80s to 90s, viruses grow. Fungus grows.
That's moisture requirement, right?
Fungus needs moisture because that's how they drink. And so if you're getting above like 60% humidity, your fungus grows. Mites are little animals.
My pets, yes.
Yeah, they need water. They need water to drink.
Oh, yeah.
So mites won't grow in low humidity. So they won't grow in 50% humidity. If you keep your humidity down 50% or below, mites don't have a drink of water. And so if you're getting in the 60% humidity and higher, you got a mite problem. Respiratory infections. Again, okay, we look like we got to come up on another break. We'll be back here in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Master Builder Show. I am your host, Jim Gibson. Our sponsor today is the First National Bank of Weatherford. My guest today is my wife and Vice President of Gibson Home Builders Incorporated. And we were talking about moisture and comfort zones primarily, and the effects of high and low humidity. Yeah,
tell me some more about that, high and low humidity.
Okay.
Some of this hadn't occurred to me.
Okay. Fungus and mites cannot grow if they don't have water. So if you keep your humidity down below 55% or so, you won't have a mite problem or a fungus problem in your house. But there again, if you get your humidity too low, then you've got problems with other bacteria, viruses, and stuff like that. So ideal is between 45 and 55%. Ideal is about 50% if you can keep it that way. And we try to put in units now that control that.
And what is it, a hygrometer that measures humidity?
Hydrometer is barometric pressure.
Oh.
So,
I don't know what it is. I have to find out.
Anyway, if you've got now on your respiratory infections, the lower the humidity, you have respiratory problems. We'll kind of get into some of those earlier. We're going to go.
Well, that's what we were guessing, if these things were accurate with the bacteria and the viruses, because they're not moisture. They're not environment impacted.
Right.
So what you're creating at that 50% humidity is the ideal situation.
Right.
You've told me several times about short cycling air conditioning.
Right. That comes in sizing your air conditioning and heating equipment. If you, back when I was growing up, I wanted, I might have a 1,000 square foot house, and I want a 5-ton air conditioner on that sucker. I'm not Tim the Tool Man, but the problem is, it will cool it, and it will cool it real quick. And the problem is it's short cycles, and short cycling means that it will run just long enough to cool it down and not dehumidify the house.
Okay.
And so what you're trying to do is dehumidify the house because you're bringing in moisture. We have relative humidity in the air. Is whatever it is for that particular day. When you're cooking, when you're bathing, when you're, most people think the fans in their bathrooms are to take out the smell. Well, that's not what they're for. They're to take out the moisture. And so when you go in the bathroom and you're taking a shower and you're steaming up, you're putting, probably 4 or 5 pints of vapor into the air that you don't realize. And that's the reason they put those fans in there when you're taking a shower. Flip on those exhaust fans and pull that moisture out of that room. Same way with cooking. That's the reason you got a vent hood up there. You want to click that on because boiling water puts steam in the air and it puts humidity in your house.
So you're telling me that if we size the air conditioner wrong, put in too big an air conditioner, you can have an ice cold house that's moldy.
You'll have a mold problem most likely. And that's the reason we try to. They do the manual J calculation. We do heat loads on all the houses we build, and we try to size the air conditioner exactly to what they need. You may
future needs.
Now you can oversize it somewhat, but you don't want to go overboard. Like if it calls for a 3-ton unit, you don't want to put in a 5-ton. You might go a 3.5. But you got to do calculations on your future needs if you're going to add on and all this other stuff.
You mean add on square footage, not people to the house, not activities.
Right.
If you were going to put a jacuzzi in the house, you don't, which is odd, I know, but another source of moisture.
Would you plan ahead? All the houses we build now, the larger ones, we've got
those gigantic jacuzzi
we've got
tubs.
Jacuzzis in the tub. That's the reason you got the exhaust fan in the bathroom area.
But you don't necessarily increase the air conditioner to accommodate that extra moisture.
No. What you're trying to do with the air conditioning heating system is cool it. What temperature should a room be? It should be normally in the summer months. We want to keep our temperatures between my comfort range is between 69 and 73 degrees Fahrenheit. I know a lot of people that they keep it up around 78, which is comfortable.
You're married to somebody that does that.
Yeah,
I don't like being outside at 105 degrees and then walk into a refrigerator. I freeze. I like a warmer house in the summertime because the contrast is so dramatic. What was it? You had told me, too, that there's a limit on air conditioning, how much they could actually cool a house down?
Well, no, there's not a limit on how much they can cool. What our figures are, if I'm not mistaken, is they need to cool 20 degrees below what the outside temperature is. And that's the way everything's set up. Most of ours are computed.
They do a lot more than that.
It's because of the way we insulate them and stuff.
That ICF house you built, he got it in the summertime.
He got it down in the 40s, but he was playing with it. He was trying to see
he
how
liked
cold
a really cold house.
Well,
and that's why he built an
nice
ICF, insulated concrete form house.
Okay, like I said, the normal temperatures that we try to keep on our houses down here in Texas in the summertime is normally between 69 and 73 degrees. And that's just what we kind of base all our calculations on. But most people, like I said, because their cooling bill down here is going to be in about, they keep it up around 78 or so, all this other stuff. And like I said, we were talking about humidity levels. Humidity should be around 50%. And if it's not, if it's higher than that, higher humidity, then you feel stuffy.
Warm.
Well, it feels warm, but it's primarily stuffy and it's hard to breathe. More important, it contributes to development of bacterial and fungus growth.
And bacterial growth, too, is dog odors more pronounced? Bacterial growth. Things that you may not notice in a house whose humidity is more controlled. You may not, you're going to become accustomed to the cat's litter pan. The house humidity goes up, you're going to really notice it. You're going to notice the dog's bed. There are odors in the house that the humidity makes dramatically worse.
Well, I'd heard a story about a guy that went over to a location and he was going to do a check on it just to show how bad the house was. Well, the house was so bad that they didn't want to do it because it was just about to fall apart, and they didn't want to go in and do anything.
Do what? I missed something.
He wanted to pull some kind of evaluation on problems with high humidity and all that stuff.
Okay.
And she said, "Well, come over. You can go to my house, and we'll just do it on that." And so he said, "Okay." So they went over there, and she was a fish lover, and so she had probably 20 or 30 or 40 large, very large fish tanks in her house. And people don't realize that fish tanks evaporate. Water evaporates anytime it's above 32 degrees. It's either freezing, going into, or evaporating.
But it's not a static
It's
liquid.
it's always in motion unless the temperature is so low that it drops. But anyway, he got in that house, and she had so many problems due to moisture that I don't remember how much she had to spend to get it ventilated right, to get the humidity back down to in between 45 and 50 to 55 degrees. She was running up around 70% humidity in her house because of her lifestyle. He went over there, and they were looking at things like, she had like 5 or 6 dogs, she had 4 or 5 cats, and she had hundreds of aquariums. And so all these things they had asthma problem in this house. Well, they had an allergy problem is what they had. Yeah. They had an allergy problem. And there again, allergies, asthma and all this stuff.
It's triggered.
People it triggers it when your humidity is too low, and it also triggers when your humidity is too high. And, but humidity, like I said, lower than 50% causes, lower than 50% causes discomfort by drying out. Well, yeah, anything lower than like in the 40s and stuff like that, your mucous brains start.
Membranes.
Yeah, mucous brains.
You may have a mucous brain. I don't.
I think I got a mucous brain today. The mucous membranes, they start drying up. You get skin rashes.
Yeah.
Low humidity, itching problems. And it looks like we got to come up on another break here. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Master Builder Show. I am your host, Jim Gibson. Today's sponsor is the First National Bank of Weatherford. My guest today is Jean Gibson. She is Vice President of Gibson Home Builders Incorporated and my wife. And we were talking about moisture problems in the house and comfort zone. And people don't realize that moisture probably affects our comfort more than any other thing other than being boiling hot in there. It affects our health. It affects our skin condition. And our breathing. Everything does. And so, what are some of the sources of moisture? You need to make sure your plumbing's not leaking. Check all your plumbing, your flashing, your roof.
You're talking about unwanted moisture.
Unwanted moisture.
Because there's a certain level of moisture that you have to have. When you've got a cold and your sinuses are just horrific.
Right.
And a hot, steamy shower sounds wonderful.
We'll get in a hot, steamy shower.
Yeah.
But you don't want to
the whole house to be hot, steamy.
You want it to be between 45 and 55 degrees, ideally about, 50%. 50% humidity. You're cooking, you're showering. If you're I've seen women hang all their stockings up in the bathroom there to dry out. Well, where's the water going?
Into the environment.
Right. In your house. We put in exhaust fans in all laundry rooms. Pretty well code. I know there's a lot of places that don't have them.
Yeah.
But any place that you're messing with water and all that, or cooking, showering, bathing, washing clothes, anything you've got a sink, you really need to have an exhaust fan in that room. And like I said, most people think the exhaust fans, they call them fart fans, but because to take the smell out of the room. But
you made your point. Thank you.
Anyway, the primary function of them is to take the moisture out of that particular room because it's a high moisture room. You had a question?
I was just reading your little note here too. Improperly vented combustion appliances and clothes dryers.
Right.
Well, I thought the whole point of the clothes dryer is that the vent where the lint goes is where the moisture goes.
That is. It's unvented clothes dryers, and they sell those.
Yes, we had one in the RV.
And they're terrible. They take forever to dry clothes.
It would take. We bought it for the RV because it would use such a small amount of water, and it was a 110 dryer. It was one unit, and it would take 3 or 4 hours of the clothes tumbling in that dryer unit because it was unvented to dry out to a damp level. That was dreadful.
Well, I know back when we would get ill at certain times and couldn't breathe, had some kind of respiratory, my mother would put a vaporizer in there.
Oh, absolutely.
And we would run that vaporizer, and she'd put that Vicks salve up in the top of it there,
Sure.
and it'd have a menthol flavor to the moist.
Eucalyptus.
And you know, I'm sure the mold and the fungus really loved that stuff, you know.
Yeah, well, that wasn't constant. There are plenty of houses, though, in the north that you have to put humidifiers in because your furniture splits. You know, my Governor Winthrop's secretary is split down the side.
What we're talking about is maintaining a constant
level. Right. I think that's a lot more tricky than most people might guess.
Well, in our newer construction, newer houses, we put devices in there to control them, and everything's figured on your heating and cooling system. And if most of the time in the winter months is when we really notice it is our skin drying out and stuff like that. Well, if you do, you know, you probably your problem is humidity's too low, so you probably need a humidifier.
But does anybody create a system, a heating cooling system that automatically?
Yes.
Well, there we go.
They have a system for everything if people were willing to pay for it.
Okay, but I didn't know if it exists, so that it would
humidifiers to put in,
add the moisture
and dehumidifiers to
create a hospital environment.
Well, you don't want that. You don't want all that staff running around there. But
nosocomial infections. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
those are infections because of all the good bacteria that grows in hospitals.
Right. All right. Another thing that you can do, and what a lot of people do to help their climate or control the climate around their house, we were talking about that, I think, during a break, is doing landscaping. It's called microclimates. And microclimate is how you plant around your house to control block the sun or block wind. You can put up certain bushes that will actually... But
with the blocking and...
Block your view?
No, I didn't mean that. I mean putting up the landscaping edging on the garden so the water runs off and pools against the house. That's really a good one.
Well,
other than it floats off the mulch, it drowns the plants and it holds water against the foundation.
Right. We do, as builders, we do our best to put a 5% grade away from the house.
And then somebody comes in and puts up edging.
Yeah, and we build dams around our houses.
Yeah.
And which is a no-no. You want, like when we're actually setting up and the customer wants us to build the flower beds and all that stuff, we put holes or actually we put PVC pipe underneath all that and all that stuff
to drain it,
to all the water drains out, and put actually a French drain down there. We put actual gravel down up against that so it doesn't plug the pipes and all that, and control that. But what they do, they create a landscape that say your ideal facing your house should be north. Most people live to the rear, and that way you've got your east and west sun exposure, which is usually the most sun coming in. You block it from entering the house. And regional, there again, we're building for regions, and you want, like up in northern states and all this stuff where you're worried about heating your house, you want it where the sun shines in and provides heat to your house. So you want to face the windows where you actually pick up and bring in the sunshine, but you do that on a south-facing wall. And the reason being is because in the winter months, and do a passive solar type construction, the sun's lower in the winter, and so the sun lower on the horizon, it'll shine into your rooms there, heat the rooms, and that's through radiation.
That was our house in Granbury, was passive solar.
Yeah.
But you put gigantic overhangs all the way around that house. And the other thing for good old Texas construction is to have the garage on that west wall. So, 'cause down here, the west is the tough side. We get terrible heat coming in on the west side and drying. So what you've tried to do, and when we've encouraged our clients to do, is to put the garage on the west side. And as long as they intend to live to the back, it depends on their property.
Right.
But
well, you can't always, out here it depends on the lot you buy and all that, because you've got to face it to where they've got the best use of their property.
Right.
And you can't always face them north or south.
Well, I was also reading in one of your magazines, or Architectural Digest, one of those, and that the trend now is to put porches on a lot of the houses. They've gotten back to that. So it's that people are now living outside more. They're doing outside kitchens. They're doing big porches. So you have to consider those things too. What part of the house are they going to be outside living, so that you can protect them from the weather?
Well, I mean, they need to think about it before they purchase their lot, really. If they're wanting to be passive solar or do some of these microclimate type things, because even bodies of water, like living on a lake, that you're actually cooler if you've got the breeze off the lake coming into your house. Trees around your house, you don't want to plant them too close to the house, and a lot of people worry about the larger trees falling on their house, but that doesn't happen that often.
I think it only takes once.
It only takes once. But primarily the reason you don't want to plant them too close to the house is because the roots come up and could cause foundation problems later on. And they also, every plant that you plant takes water away from the soil.
And the slab.
And the slab. And depending on your area, whether you're in a very expansive soil area or not, you need to really concentrate on the type of plants you use and stuff like that, because the more water you take out, the more shrinkage you have in the soil. The more shrinkage you have, the more movement you have. I know when we built a house in South Arlington there that we lived in for like 18 years. That was on that black gumbo that came down through.
Oh, it was amazing motion.
Las Colinas and all that stuff. And like I said, it is the most, it probably, that soil there moves more than any soil in the nation. It moves up to 1 foot, I believe, is what the deal on. But I know we would get cracks out there that were probably 3 and 4 inches wide, and I don't know how deep they were. You couldn't fill them up with water. And in the summer, in the wintertime, they close up. Looks like that's going to be it for our show today. We've had a great time. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
And we will see you.
All to the new beginnings.
Yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday.